Good early afternoon, everybody. Or if you're in the West Coast or Mountain West Coast, good late morning. This is James Krishnarik here from Real Steel Sports, and this is now Conference Championship game weekend. It's Sunday, time for two of the biggest games of the year to be played. The NFC title game, which is the second game between the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks, and the first game being the AFC title game between the Denver Broncos and the New England Patriots. The first game I'm breaking down is the Seahawks and the 49er games. But first, I'd like to apologize for not doing my wrap-ups for last weekend. I went 3-1 with my picks. The only game that I was wrong involved this game, and it involved the Niners and the Panthers. I thought that Carolina would overtake San Francisco at home, and I was wrong. But so far in the playoff season, I'm 6-2, and this weekend I am going to say that it's going to be the most. This game, it's kind of funny because everybody's picking differently. There's no real sense of security with these games because there are people saying that both home teams or both road teams or one of the home teams from this conference or one of the home teams the other. It's so mixed. Like, opinions are very mixed with these two playoff games. Because you got the 49ers, you got the Seahawks, that game could go either way, and you got Broncos, Patriots, that game could go either way. It's kind of funny because this year the Seahawks and Niners split games, and the Patriots and Broncos split halves, pretty much. But I think for this game, I'm going to start with the first game, San Francisco and Seattle. This is the game I think everybody thought was going to happen in the NFC title game at the start of the season. I think everybody felt that it was going to be San Francisco and Seattle. I had Green Bay and Seattle, but I have to say this gives us a much better game because you got two evenly matched teams, two teams that win in similar ways, run the ball, play defense, young quarterbacks that are mobile, great offensive line play, and above-average head coaches. It's just the subtle differences in these two teams that make it so worthwhile watching. And that's what makes these games so much fun, and so much fun to call and to pick because so many nuances in these games, and I'm really looking forward to them, particularly this one. Like, Denver, New England's going to be great, but Brady versus Manning part, 15? I'm rooting for Denver, but I'll get to that game in a little bit, but this game's more interesting to me because you've got division rivals, because you've got, coaches who hate each other, you've got teams that hate each other, you've got defense, you've got everything. This is going to be a good old-fashioned NFC bloodbath. Those are the kind of games that get your blood boiling as a fan, that make you want to be a part of them. For this game, let's break it down by a little bit. Let's start with the Seahawks offense against the 49ers defense. What makes What makes this game so interesting is the fact that you've got two teams that are so similar yet so different. And it starts on this side of the ball. I think that Seattle offense against San Francisco's defense, Seattle is a much better passing offense than San Francisco is. I know the 49ers have better receivers, but Seattle's quarterback, I think Russell Wilson's a better quarterback in terms of, throwing and maybe even more running because he's a smarter runner, because he's better, more maneuverable in the pocket. But he's so good at getting that ball down the field and getting it to his receivers. He's much better in the deep ball. And he's more accurate than any other facet. And he's smarter, too, than Colin Kaepernick, I would have to say. He's not going to make the dumb plays or the dumb reads like Kaepernick will occasionally do. But the difference being is that on the other parts of the offense, you got pretty similar matchups. But if I could look at one area where Seattle, I think, has a big edge over San Francisco, it's their pass protection. Because the way that San Francisco's passing offense has worked this year, Kaepernick's been sacked a lot. I mean, this year, in terms of pass protection efficiency, it's kind of ironic because Seattle's actually been sacked more often than San Francisco. But the difference is San Francisco's played a lot better defensive fronts. They have. Green Bay's defensive front is pretty good at getting after the quarterback, and they played Arizona a couple times. Also, Seattle did. Carolina had a hell of a game against them in the first game. Russell Wilson got sacked like a bunch in like a couple games. Other than that, he was really upright in the pocket. And when this team played their best games against the toughest teams in the league, their offensive line played better. On the road, their offensive line struggled, but at home, that offensive line was like an impenetrable wall. I would say that San Francisco is going to have some problems getting to Russell Wilson. I think they'll sack him 2, 3, maybe even 4 times, but I think consistent pressure throughout the day is going to be tough because going into Seattle and dealing with that crowd and that offensive line for Seattle is going to be a lot of problems. In terms of the skill position players, that's an area where I think San Francisco has an advantage, but Seattle, I think they'll be able to take advantage of one big matchup. In fact, Carlos Rogers, the cornerback for San Francisco, his hamstrings bothered him. He was a big factor in the win over the Seahawks, the 49ers, earlier in the season, the 19-17 one on the last-second field goal. But I think that they're going to be able to expose, even without Percy Harvin playing with a concussion, I think they'll be able to expose some matchup issues because Doug Baldwin, Golden Tate have had a great job this year getting open, and I think Zach Miller will be a challenge on the inside for Bowman and Willis. If you flip it over to San Francisco's defense, you look at the defensive starters and that linebacking core in general, with Bowman and Willis in the middle and Smith and Brooks on the outside. It's the best linebacking core in the league, bar none. But their secondary can be questionable at times. I think that San Francisco is going to have to play much better in the secondary because I know they played Rodgers and I know they went against Cam Newton, but going to Seattle and playing Russell Wilson at home, who's literally just like scarily efficient at home, that's going to be tough to deal with. That is really going to be tough to deal with. I would have to say that if San Francisco wants to win this game, then they're really going to have to get to Russell Wilson. That's the only hope. Because if Russell Wilson gets any time in the pocket, dissect him, it's not even going to be a close game. But Marshawn Lynch is a key too, because Lynch has had a couple of big games against the Niners at home as a member of the Seahawks. And I think that trend will continue because I think they're going to pound away. I think they're going to try to mix it up, and they're not going to give San Fran too much of anything. And it's going to be really, really tough for San Fran to gauge what Seattle's going to do because, again, Marshawn Lynch is such a factor in the running game, and he's a good pass protector and a very good pass receiver too. And they've also got to account for Russell Wilson because he's faster than Kaepernick in terms of his pure speed because he can go from standing in the pocket to having a first down before you even know it. I mean, Kaepernick's a big body; he's a target. Russell Wilson's not even 6 feet tall. He's very little of any kind of target at all. He can just duck and he can like spin, very mobile, very elusive, I should say. But in that matchup, I think that San Francisco is a slight disadvantage, only because of the fact that Seattle's front five at home is like an impenetrable fortress. And because I think Marshawn's going to be able to have some decent carries. Like, I don't think he's going to average 5-6 yards a carry, but I think he could potentially hit 90 yards. If he hits 90 yards, I think that Seattle's in a really good position for this game. Now, if you flip it over, you've got San Francisco's offense against Seattle's defense. This is a problem for San Francisco, a big problem. Because Green Bay secondary, no. Carolina secondary, okay. Seattle secondary, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, and Richard Sherman. Just those are the three main cogs in that secondary. Two of the best safeties and the best cornerback, not even a close second, in the NFL. That's going to be problematic for anybody to go against. Because Sherm will probably match up against Crabtree. That matchup is negated. I think they'll probably double Bolden in the secondary. Now, that would leave Bobby Wagner line up against Vernon Davis. And that's actually not a bad matchup for Seattle because Bobby Wagner is a very quick inside linebacker, very quick middle linebacker. And the front four for Seattle with Bruce Irvin and Chris Clemens and Cliff Averill is going to be, they're going to be feasting on Colin Kaepernick. I know they did a better job at pass protecting in the NFC divisional game against Carolina than they did in the previous game. And they also did a better job pass protecting Colin Kaepernick than in the first game against Green Bay. But this is a different animal in Seattle. It's almost like, I hate using the term, like other external factors than actually in the game, but again, that home crowd just does so much for that football team. In my opinion, there is no doubt in my mind that if the game this previous week against New Orleans was on a neutral field or in New Orleans, then that game would have been a New Orleans victory. I do. But Seattle's defense was willed. They made so many big stops and made a couple of key turnovers. And Wilson didn't play great, but he was efficient enough to win. But that Marshawn Lynch just pounding the rock, that was just incredible. He was the Seahawks offense that day. I mean, the game he had against the Seattle Seahawks was the game he had against the New Orleans Saints. 28 carries, 140 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Against a run defense that's underrated, I think they'll have more trouble running against San Francisco's front, but I expect Beast Mode to have a better good game. But speaking of which, back to the other matchup I was talking about, San Francisco's offense, Seattle's defense. The one advantage that San Francisco does have, and it is the speed of Michael Crabtree. Because Sherman's probably going to be covering him or Bolden, one of those two. I don't know really which one. I thought Crabtree, but the more I think about it, I don't know who's going to be covering. If he's stuck on Bolden, Bolden's getting shut out for the game. In fact, that might actually be a fist fight that can get both players ejected, knowing the way those two guys fight and claw and trash talk. God, I hope Sherman beats them. But let's put it this way. Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas in the secondary is going to be a problem for Kaepernick. He's had so many struggles playing in Seattle in his career. Like, I'm loading it right now, his career game logs. In the 2 games in his career he's gone to Seattle, they've lost 30-29 and 13-42. And in those 2 games combined, he is 32 of 64 for just over 300 yards, 1 touchdown, 4 picks. Those kind of numbers are going to be really problematic for San Francisco's cause. It's funny because, a lot of people are picking San Fran to go in to beat Seattle because, they did it to Carolina and they did it to Green Bay. But the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field and Carolina's front 4 is somewhat formidable. Like, we could probably compare it to, I don't really know. I'm not good with analogies right now, but it's pretty formidable. Let's just put it that way. Seattle's home field advantage makes that look like a joke. An earthquake. They had seismic activity again when Marshawn Lynch scored his touchdowns against the Saints. You don't think that if the Seahawks score, that place is going to be rocking? That place is going to be rocking in the pregame. That place is probably rocking right now, 3 hours before the game even starts, like 5 hours before the game even starts. It's just going to be really tough for San Francisco to go into Seattle and beat them with Colin Kaepernick at the helm. If they had a quarterback that was a better pocket passer, like one of the guys in the AFC title game, Brady or Manning, I could see them beating Seattle because the fact, they'll be able to make some better reads, make some more checkdowns. Kaepernick's not really good at that. If his first target isn't there, he gets sacked or he takes off. Sherman's going to light him up. Earl Thomas is going to light him up. It's just really problematic for San Francisco. And my pick for this game officially is the Seattle Seahawks. They will be representing the NFC in Super Bowl 48. I will say that Seattle wins this game 30-27. It's going to be a close game. Actually 30-24. I say 30-24 because I think Seattle gets enough stops defensively. I think they'll get somewhat of a halftime lead, But at the same time, I don't really think this game's going to be put away at any point. Like, it's going to be close. I think San Fran will get a touchdown and make the score look a little closer than it was. But I think Seattle will run out the clock with beast mode, and I think they'll be on to the Super Bowl.